Hello again. Welcome to Same Difference Theater. I'm your host, Scary Gary.
Ah!
Today, I want to talk about, it's Thanksgiving. It's November, what is it, 28th, 2019. Boy, the time flies by so fast. I can't even keep track of the dates
Time's
anymore.
fun when you're
Maybe
having flies.
it's a
What
sign of
a
old age.
jackass.
Uh, I just, a little while ago, about an hour or so ago, I was the local Walmart here in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. And again, they're getting all ready for the Black Friday stuff. They get certain parts of the store roped off, sectioned off, and stuff, and got stuff already out on display. Of course, it doesn't go on for the Black Friday sale just yet, or I guess. I don't get into all this stuff. I never really got into the Black Friday thing.
Bitch,
I
bitch,
guess some
bitch,
people can
bitch,
justify it.
bitch.
They say, well, there's all kinds of deals, sales, get something for a song, um, but I don't like this.
Who the
And,
hell
I'm going to sound like a
cares?
bummer of a guy to some people out there, but I just feel I need to speak my mind on this a little bit. And not everybody's going to see this video anyway, but those who do, they can take what they want from it. If it's aware people and they'll understand where I'm coming from, they'll kind of agree and they'll get some value out of it, maybe, what I'm discussing here. And others that get into the whole holiday fervor, whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, you name it, they'll take offense at it on certain commercial grounds, on grounds of, well, that's a good time for people to get together, or on, some religious grounds or whatever, and well, what I want to say is that first, let's look at the word holiday. Now, this is Thanksgiving, and of course, we can discuss the word Thanksgiving, but let's start with the word holiday. And of course, this would apply to any holiday, of course. So, Christmas is another. Halloween, you name it. All the different days set aside on the calendar that people observe to as a special day and to engender some kind of a special spirit with certain customs and certain belief systems, what have you. And of course, the commercial world, the corporate world, the world of making money, of goods and, well, definitely goods, at least anyway, and services, can make a good killing on this day. Holy day. That's what it means, holiday. And anybody that's not aware of this, my God, I don't know what to say. It's right there. You just, it means holy day. Now, in fact, you can go into the Bible, and I'm not a big Bible thumper in the way that many people are. That's all I'll say for now because I don't want to get off on a discussion of the Bible too deeply. And it talks about, excuse me, in the Old Testament, as what people call the first quote unquote half of the book before, the gospel accounts and so forth, as the Old Testament. And in the other circles, they just refer to it as the Hebrew Scriptures because of the fact that it was originally, supposedly anyway, mostly written in Hebrew originally and penned in Hebrew. And the later part, the Gospels and so forth, are sometimes referred to either the New Testament, excuse me, New Testament or Greek scriptures because of Greek being the primary language that it was first, that part of the Bible was first written in. But anyway, in the Older Testament, as well as in the New Testament, Hebrew scriptures and Greek scriptures, but mostly in the Hebrew scriptures, you look, and it starts out with a lot of things about saying about holding a holy convocation. Depends on what translation of the Bible you read. Whether it's a New International Version, the King James Version, whatever. But along the lines of a holy observances, holy days, holy convocations, holy assemblages to honor supposedly God. But what people don't realize is this: all this origins of this stuff is steeped in, and not just Christianity or Judaism, but a lot of monotheism, but also some ideas that could be considered pagan, which I'm not. I don't. I mean, that's a label some people use to distinguish other things from Christianity and Hebrew Judaism. They call it heathen ideas or paganism. That could be anything from witchcraft or whatever. But you always find out, if you really start to study this and become aware, it's all astro-theological. I highly recommend that people, for one thing, there's many individuals you could listen to on the internet and get books on and stuff, and look at people who discuss astrotheology, which really is a combination of the word astro, star, astrology, and theology, which is like a religion, the study of God. So most belief systems are steeped in some form of the like a perennial understanding of astrological slash theological, or the motions of heavenly bodies, and supposedly linking that with concepts of understanding God and certain cycles. And again, this goes across the board for many, many religions. But astrotheological concepts have to do with the motions of heavenly bodies, primarily the sun, but also some things to do with the moon and cycles of the moon. The zodiac signs, as far as the great Platonic year, which is, the greater year, which is connected with the precession of the equinox, as every, I forget what it is, every, my memory's failing me right now, but it's 2000 some years, I think. 2000, I can't remember the exact now. Well, anybody watching this and knows about it would know what I'm referring to. But so, I mean, you fill in the blanks as far as the exact year, if you know what they are. I forget what it is, but every couple of thousand years, the there is a different, has to do with the tilt of the Earth's axis. Unless you're a flat earther, I don't know what they would say, but tilt of the Earth's axis, therefore how the Earth's axis is tilted, and what seeming path the sun makes throughout the different zodiac signs. What zodiac sign comes up over the horizon in the morning, and so forth. During every couple of thousand years, that changes. And so the orientation of the Earth's wobble and tilt of its axis with respect to the galaxy, the back set of the stars, the backdrop of the stars, we're in a different zodiac sign every couple of thousand years. And of course, there's been, supposedly during Jesus' time, it was the sign of Pisces. And of course, we look at the earlier books of the Bible. It's obvious because of some of the themes of the Bible. Making the golden calf, and Aaron for the people when Moses was up in the mountains getting the 10 Commandments. So that was probably a time of, I guess, there was a period where you can see in the Bible, it traces out astrotheological things where it's like the bull, and then it becomes the sign of the ram, and then it becomes Pisces when Jesus appears, to be the quote unquote promised one, whatever. Excuse me, the age of Pisces, and which is maybe part of the reasons too. You can think about this, and people can say what they want, but let's face it, he did say he would make, first of all, primarily many of his followers were fishermen, and then he said, I'll make you fishers of men. So the age of Pisces, and it's no small wonder then that a lot of Christians nowadays too have the fish symbol on their thing, and it's supposed to represent Christ and allude to the fact that they're Christians, if they have that bumper sticker. And so we have, supposedly we are entering into, or we've just started into, whatever, I don't know, because I don't know what the exacts are when it begins the age of Aquarius, but supposedly we are into or just starting into the age of Aquarius. And again, as far as if you look at the night sky and study some even good old astronomy, this idea of these zodiacal constellations and how they are oriented in the sky and in the morning sky and stuff, it would seem that yeah, we're entering into a time when the Aquarius zodiac sign is the constellation is of course a predominant one with the orientation of the Earth, the tilt of the Earth's axis, precession of the equinoxes. Because I remember in high school learning about some of this stuff too a little bit, and there's a wobble to the Earth, and then the Earth's axis is tilted 23.5 degrees, something like that. You can get on me out there, hecklers, about what the exact numbers are, but you know what I'm getting at. Don't mince details with me as such. I'm not here to be a perfectionist. I'm here to make certain points. That this doesn't change the content of my points that I'm trying to make, even if I'm not getting the exact numbers right or what have you. So we're in the age of Aquarius, or pretty much so. Now, it's funny because in the Bible, too, there's an incident where Jesus tells his followers, and they're asking where we're going to have this, observe the, what is it? It was already a Hebrew observance that they were going to observe. Which was, I can't remember now. See, I'm a little rusty on this stuff, but I used to know this stuff real well because I was a Christian of sorts. But it was going to be what we would call the Last Supper. They didn't refer to it as that in the Bible as such, but this would be, they would observe this. Again, I can't remember what the Judaic observance was now. And he said, well, when you go into this city, you'll find a man carrying a water pitcher or a container of water, something along those lines. And so this to me, and I didn't originally know this myself because you have to become aware before this stuff starts to add up. But it's a reference to the sign of Aquarius, the water bearer, the man carrying the water and pouring out the water pitcher. So, again, the Bible has astrotheological, what do you want to call, I know what I want to say, but I can't think. Well, there's metaphors in there. There's symbolisms. It has astrotheological references in it, believe it or not. And of course, some Christians would beg to differ, and they would balk at that, and they get angry, or if they say, "Well, yeah, Satan uses those things that are from God, and he twists them around for astrology reasons and stuff to create astrology." I don't even get into that argument, but suffice it to say, there is astrotheological references there. My point is, and even Jesus being called the Son of God, which is S-O-N, and people say, well, that's S-O-N, and I'm saying, yeah, but it has esoteric links to the word S-U-N, our word for that thing in the sky that keeps the earth lit during the daylight hours, which people see in the sky during the daytime. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's got the same common roots. You understand some things about esoteric philosophy, you begin to understand why they would have coined a word sun, which we just think are just two different words that mean different things that just happen to sound the same. Homonyms, and I can get into that in another discussion some other time, as well as antonyms and synonyms. But it's because these things are part of a long forgotten perennial wisdom. And the people who created the phonetic alphabet knew about this. And there was some hoodwinking going on way back when to try to bewitch us with words. But the words themselves, when you become aware, starts to tell a story that opens your eyes, despite any bewitching you may have previously been under the spell of. The words are spelled. Yeah. So So you have sun worship there, essentially. And many references to Jesus is called the son of, uh, well, there's also references. Some people say in some references in the Bible, and I can't remember offhand where they're at. It's sometimes the son of the dawn, and I don't know, they get kind of confused with it all. They say certain references are to Satan being like Lucifer, the bright morning star, or something. Another reference is something similar, and they say it's Jesus in that case. Well, I could get into what's really going on there esoterically. What we're considering to be from an esoteric, metaphorical, astrotheological standpoint, there's no difference between Jesus and Satan. That would shock people, but I'm not saying anything against having love for people and the idea that, necessarily that lying to people and stuff and evil things don't happen. But we got to understand what the Bible is really all about, because it's a book rich with symbolisms. It's steeped in esoteric philosophy, but it's an exoteric rendition of those esoteric philosophies. So therefore, it's secularized metaphysics largely, unless you're really keen and you can really interpret what's really being referred to there esoterically. But as it's been carried out in its interpretations and indoctrination for the masses of various denominations of Christianity, it just pretty much comes down to being an exoteric metaphysics, which is a straying from the true esoteric meanings of the symbolisms and what the whole story of Christ is really all about, and what the whole idea of consciousness is about, and what astrotheological perennial wisdom, what that's really referring to, that is of importance. It has its importance, but if it's being interpreted from an exoteric, secularized metaphysics standpoint, then people aren't getting the right meaning of that stuff contained there, written therein. So, holiday, though. Man, I got off track. I'm sorry. I was kind of setting a backdrop here somewhat to help to lead into why. Okay, these are holy day observances. And again, in our world, in our day and age especially, but it's always been this way, really, there's a commercial aspect to things. There is this whole idea of it being religious, too. These holidays have both a religious and a commercial aspect. But this is because the people that created the phonetic alphabet, and again, they're steeped in mystery. You can't really find a lot of good information, and I think that's by design, as far as the origins of the, and things in deeper understanding of the Phoenicians. I think there's a lot of information hidden in the Bible concerning certain things like, I can't remember how it's pronounced, Tyre and Sidon, and some other places in the Bible refer to. And the Canaanites, actually, these are just different code words that are referring to this group of people that created. They were elites that created their own. They created a language of phonetics, and that's why it's a Babylonish type the ideas that combines, even though in their everyday lives people think these are separate things, but it really ties together the commercial aspects of our world, the religious aspects, the political aspects, and education, which is just a bunch of indoctrination, and it's a lot of it's dumbing down. In our world, these things are all tied together, even though on the surface, yeah, it looks like, because you give them different labels, classify them, this is commercialism, this is religion over here, everybody gets this idea that these things are separate things and they don't somehow synergistically work together. Well, I'm here to tell you they do. And so around these times of these holidays, you can look at it, and it's about different arrangements of how the Earth is tilted, supposedly different energy from different star systems, different points in the astronomical layout of the sky. And whether there's any truth to that, I don't know, as far as there being energy in a certain way, or that energy flows differently. But people, this is getting kind of new agey, I realize, but see, there has to be something to that, because see, the commercial world really likes to get people into the holiday fervor for the religious reasons and for the reasons of getting together, gathering together in places, and they make a lot of money. They got people like Pavlov's dog. I sometimes say, oh, I'm living in a world of Pavlov's dogs. Ring a bell and get the dog to do what you conditioned it to do, and that's what goes on during these holidays. I mean, yes, the bell in this situation, compared with when putting it that Pavlov's dog example in this context, it just serves as a metaphor, but it's the same idea of conditioning people, getting them to do what you want them to do, making money off of them, and actually getting power through that too. Because in the end, the people that get the most money higher up are the ones that created money to begin with, the idea of money, and they're the ones that print it. So it's not really about the money. It's about the control they get over people, to keep people enslaved to time, to money, and we are enslaved to that as a society. It's awfully, that's why it's, the idea of the expression, certain expressions like a day late and a dollar short, or as I like to put it, a day short and a dollar late. We're always, short on time or money, and in various situations where those concepts of time and money work against us. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some things you can do to maybe make those things work a little bit more for you, but understand this. Ultimately, and I have to explain this in another video, ultimately, time and money are illusory, made-up human ideological constructs. There is no such thing as time, ultimately, and there's no such thing as money, of course. And anybody, at least with respect to money, people should be able to understand it. Now, time, they say, well, of course there's time, because this object was over here, and now it's over here. It took a certain amount of time to do that. Again, there's an eternal now. Time is just our way of. Ken Wheeler covers it on YouTube, his YouTube channel. A little bit about the idea of what about the ether, and about the fact that what we're considering to be separate forces are just different modalities of one thing, and it creates magnitude, and how that loss of inertia creates magnitude. And that's what creates the idea, because what time is a measurement of the change of magnitude of something, is all. So really, time is just this human construct. And of course, in science class, I remember from science class how you can derive. Well, you can break something down in the equations and say, well, like what's the unit of force? Newton's. How is it? Yeah, Newton is a kilogram, and I'm rusty on this, but kilogram, because it's force equals mass times acceleration. Let's see. Kilogram meter per second squared. No, sorry. Energy is, let me get this right. See, I got to draw upon my memory. And Newton is a kilogram, a unit of force, the Newton in the metric system. Well, they call it something else, but you know what I'm saying, as opposed to using feet and stuff. We're talking in the metric meters. Okay. Kilogram, its force is mass. Okay, there's mass times acceleration, but then so that's kilogram meters per second squared, yes. And so, but then you also multiply it by distance that force acts throughout to get the energy. So, yeah. Well, that's for energy. I'm sorry, I'm getting off. Yeah, you're right. Okay, I got it wrong. I'm sorry. I'm getting mixed up. Okay, force is mass times acceleration. So yes, kilogram meters per second squared. Talking about force here, not energy. Okay, so these other things like force are basing on the idea of mass, matter, a measure of matter that something contains, supposedly. This is assuming that matter is a real thing and it's solid, okay? A unit of measure of mass times a unit of measure of acceleration, which acceleration is so many measurements of distance units, in this case meters, every second per second, every second. the change in that speed every second. So that would be a meter per second, or meters per second squared. If you understand the algebraic and math there stuff, it's not that hard to understand really, but kilogram meters per second squared. So they're basing the idea of force on the ideas of matter, space, as in distance between 2 points, and of course we can have 3 dimensions of space. So you can even you get into area and volume, but when it's moving in a straight line, we're just considering one linear dimension of motion in a lot of cases. So meters. And second is a unit of time, and of course time, but it's really just an arbitrary thing that was made up originally. It's just because it was a way to try to measure, well, what happens when this, how can we measure, what we're going to use to measure when something's here and then it's over here, or say a certain amount of time has passed, or even this position, the state of something. Let's say water changes from liquid to a vapor, how much time has passed. So it's a measure of any kind of change in status, state, position, excuse me, of matter. But as I'll get into in another video later down the road, matter and Newtonian space, and again, if you watch Ken Wheeler's videos, you can get to understand this if you pay attention and watch it enough. It's hard if you've been conditioned a certain way, and even I still have to kind of really think about what he's saying. But it's not that he's full of crap. It's not that I'm dumb per se. It's just getting past a lot of conditioning, being conditioned the wrong way for many years about a lot of things, about how reality works. But matter, Newtonian space, time are all a result of an illusion caused by a modality of what the one ultimate force is. And I can't remember, I might be getting it wrong, and he might correct me, but it's kind of like, it's magnetism is what the only thing there really is. We're talking about, magnetism and dielectric. And when you're talking about different modalities, when I'm saying different modalities, that's what manifests through what's called what he terms the loss of inertia. He says it boils down to Newton's laws again in a certain way, but in a different way than what you were taught in school. It's force and motion and acceleration and the loss of inertia, which that sounds like the same kind of terms that Newton was throwing around, but a greater understanding of this from a natural philosophical, esoteric philosophical standpoint, because Newton and them, or somebody later along the line, divorced the ideas of what we got from physics, from Newton, divorced it from other esoteric mystical concepts which were just as important to keep. But because many people wanted to dominate things and wanted to start measuring things out to control things, they just tossed the whole metaphysics aspects aside. I mean, because even if you were into science in high school, and maybe there's some slight reference to Plato and these guys, and Pythagoras too, as in geometry and the Pythagorean theorem, they always focus on what they said as far as measuring and some geometry, but they'll sweep under the rug and won't even mention what these guys had to say about the metaphysics, about non-Euclidean geometry. They only focus, our public education system largely just focuses on Euclidean geometry. And therefore it becomes all about physical stuff. And it's just a matter of trying to just push anything spiritual, metaphysical aside. Well, you can choose to do that, but that's just ignoring something that's really there. You can pretend it's not there, but it's still there. And that's why we have a problem in this world, because we've been conditioned to lose sight of, and to not be aware of, I should say, whatever, of the metaphysical aspects of things. This is why atheism became such a big mindset for a lot of people, because the fully automatic model of how the universe works, a mechanistic thing like it's a machine, is what people pretty much rely on and put their faith in, whether they understand that they do or not, whether they really consciously know that they do or not. And again, They built science on the shoulders of these guys like Pythagoras and Plato or whoever, and yet these guys actually had more to say than what the scientists are saying. I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, we'll take what these guys said. They're pretty smart, but yeah, what they said about this metaphysical stuff, what kind of nuts were they? I mean, to me, it's like honoring something that they said, but then taking something else. They said, that's not useful to us. And again, it was, I think, Rene Descartes was also instrumental in trying to set the stage for starting to separate because way back in history, human beings and the civilization considered everything one more, and there was no distinction between spiritual aspects of life and secular aspects or whatever. But along comes Rene Descartes, and maybe others before him too, to some extent, but he's most noted for it. He began something he wrote, and I can't remember what it was, where he began to write about separating those two things, the spiritual aspects and then the science aspects. So he said, okay, let the churches handle this spiritual stuff, and let's what we'll consider the priests of science will handle the physical world and so forth, which compartmentalized and separated the two, and to put it in the hands of the people in religion, and put the other aspect of life, and the supposed physical aspect of life, in the hands of science, was a terrible thing to do. And again, I don't want to get into that too much now. I can explain why it was and what happened as a result of that, which many people aren't aware of. So this divorcing of these things, see, esoteric philosophy teaches about the ideas of alchemical marriage, things coming together, creating a synthesis. When you start thinking in dualistic terms, that's an illusion to begin with. When you start to separate things into this polarized thing of one extreme or the other, and act as if they don't have any connection at all between them, you're not getting the full, true picture of how reality and consciousness and everything really is. And, there's been different people said if we can marry, so to speak, I'm using the word marry, I don't know if they say that, but if you'd marry religion and science together, then you might come up with the truth. And there's a bit of truth to that. But you got to get rid of the egos of these people that are still thinking in these compartmentalized, separated, segregated ways. And they got us be willing to lose a little bit of fame, a little bit of their ego, and thinking that they have everything right. They're going to have to make certain concessions and begin to realize, well, wait a minute, just because we think we have something right doesn't mean we do. And anyway, these things need to come back together, though, because they got separated. But see, when they come back together, it's not even going to necessarily have the terminology of one being called religion and the other science. It'll be a melding together of these things, and we'll call it something else altogether. And again, what words you label something really doesn't matter. All words are made up. I love it when some people will say, well, I'll use a word. I'll come up with my own word sometimes and say, well, that's not even a word. And I'll say, or as if say, you just made that up. All words are made up. And it's interesting because in the Avengers movie, the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and I told you sometimes in my videos I would refer to some of the Marvel movies for strictly on them and talk about some things with that Marvel comics. In the well, I'm trying to think of which one it was now. One of the latest ones, the Avengers. Oh, Infinity War, that one. Whenever Thor's on board the ship with the Guardians of the Galaxy, excuse me, and he mentions the name of a star system, like where he'd go with these, what were they, the dwarves or the elves. And I wasn't familiar with them from my comic reading, because Thor was one comic I didn't read a whole lot of, but where they made and forged the weapons of the Asgardian gods and so forth, like Thor's hammer, and in the movie they ended up getting forging what he called Stormbreaker. And anyway, this Nidavellir, I think is the place. It's a dying star, the heart of a dying star. They forged this from the energy from this star. And there was like a technological construct around it to try to focus that energy from that star, and then they could heat up this metal, this special metal, and make these powerful weapons. Thor lost his hammer, in an earlier movie, Thor Ragnarok, he was going to try to get back a weapon, and this time they were going to forge a different weapon, similar in some respects, but different. And I think it was supposed to be more powerful too. Well, yeah, it was. And anyway, when he mentioned the name Nidavellir, Drax says, "You made up that word." And then Thor says under his breath, "All words are made up." Okay, well, people don't understand it because people get so used to labels because we classify things in our Western culture. Thanks to Rene Descartes and other people, and they strayed from the union of different things and relying on something better than phonetic language and classifications. We came down and it came down into our society boiled down to a lot of classifications of things because mankind thinks that, well, everything's made up of stuff, particles, different thingies, you know, and once we break it down, we'll find the ultimate building blocks of stuff. But look at the particle accelerators and stuff like that, and they keep on finding more particles, and that's all they're going to do because based on how consciousness works, as long as you're looking for particles, you're going to find them. You're the one creating the particles because you're cutting apart what you think is something solid, and it isn't. It isn't. This is a direct result of quantum physics kind of idea too, because they say, okay, well, the observer affects the outcome of something. So is there really an objective reality? In many respects, there isn't. It's all subjective. So if consciousness affects things, if you're saying, well, I want to find more particles, you're going to find them. You're getting what you're looking for, so to speak, because you're making it up as you go. We're co-creators in this reality. And again, that's a whole other discussion too. But what I'm going to say right now in this context is we create these things. And we create a lot of stuff that we think is fact and solid reality because we come together and convene to agree on these things. But just because we do that doesn't mean that reality is set in stone. Reality is malleable. And again, I'm not a worshiper or praiser of Einstein, and I know Ken Wheeler isn't either. But even Einstein said, that reality was an illusion, albeit a persistent one. So the idea was, yes, reality is an illusion, but the way it appears to be this thing that's not an illusion to most people, and they think, oh, it's reality solid. If I stub my toe on a rock, it's real. That's a real thing there. I hit my toe. I felt the pain. It has to be real. It's only because it has a degree of persistency in it based on how we view it and what we want to come to agree upon. Consciousness plays a role in this. Mostly by our collective consciousnesses coming together has the most power. But even a person's individualized microcosmic consciousness can affect a certain amount of change. But all I'm saying is that reality is not the set in stone thing. It's not solid. I mean, you go even to classical physics you learn in high school. Didn't they tell you that most of the atom is made up of empty space? So we're saying these things that are so solid are mostly empty space. Maybe it's all space. And it's just vibrational things in this stuff that we consider to be space. A medium, an ether, as it were. Michelson and Morley said their experiment supposedly said there was no ether. But listen to Ken Wheeler. He can show you and explain better than me that there is an ether. And what we're perceiving as these things like matter and time and space are a result of this ultimate force that there is. This is why they even said in physics, when I went to school anyway, and you learn about law of gravity. So, yeah, right. Remember electromagnetism, the nuclear force, strong and weak. Well, interestingly enough, mathematically, they follow what's called the inverse square law. They have the thing about like the law of products because you're usually multiplying two things together, like mass times mass or whatever, and then you're also taking into account the square of the distance between things. Same mathematical structure, and all these separate forces, these four separate forces or whatever, follow that same inverse square law. That's why they said, maybe we're talking about one thing here. Or there's some grand unified theory that connects all this, because why is it just so freaky that these things follow the same basic mathematical formula? Well, listen to what Ken Wheeler has to say on this, and I think you might get an understanding of, I see. That makes sense. But again, I'm still learning this stuff. I'm a thick-headed, scatterbrained individual, and I'm going to admit it. I'm no real intelligent person. Wisdom, I try to seek wisdom, but I'm still just, you know, I'm still in diapers. But anyway, and I know I'm getting way off topic here. I am sorry. Bear with me in the beginning, because anything I do in the beginning with some of these videos, my first videos, are just a matter of laying some groundwork. You'll get to understand some things, and then that way I can always, in future videos, I can get more specific on certain subjects, and then it'll always tie back in with some of these earlier videos. I'm kind of laying a bunch of groundwork here, but anyway, Ken Wheeler, good individual. Listen to another one I meant to mention earlier because of Astro theology. Listen to Santos Bonacci. Look him up on the internet. Santos Bonacci. Anyway, back to the holidays. So we're talking about energy and stuff, and we're talking about and supposedly, from what I can understand, there's a very real possibility that during certain times of these holiday observances, because they're always occur pretty much the same time on the calendar, it's about getting energy from people. When it's easiest to transfer energy from place to place in this reality, this matrix, they do that, and they're also using money because it's sapping more people of a lot of creative energy and so forth. Because when you're consuming, you're not creating yourself. The consumption, there are those who run the world that are getting this, and I know this sounds freaky to some people out there, but those who are awake and watching this video, they know what I'm talking about, I do believe, at least to some extent. And this is a way to sap off energy from people, creative energy. It's like the Matrix is almost like, in some ways, AI, artificial intelligence. And again, there's a theory on that. I don't know for sure, but basically, you know, take the creative potential of creators, which we are divine, and sap it off of them, take it off of them. Have them get involved in religious rituals, commercial consumerism at these juncture points when energy is easier to siphon off, especially when they gather in groups, large amounts of energy, and and again, I don't want to get too deep into that either. Again, all these different things I'm touching on are all subject areas to talk about in and of themselves. You can make a video or several videos just on some of these other points that I keep kind of going off on a tangent on. But holidays, holy days, why do we observe them? And it's gotten to me over the years. Now, when I was young, I didn't know any better, and of course, you get into the whole fervor like Christmas, because you get a new toy, or and some people, well, hey, I get together with people I don't see all the time. But this raises a question, like with gathering with people. I don't know if anybody else has been paying attention, but this is like the only times when people get together the most. There could be all kinds of other days of the year, excuse me, and people don't get together because they're in the rat race. They're trying to make money. What? So they can set aside these few days to observe and have some fun with their friends and their family, and to buy the things that they work so hard for in the rat race. It's bad enough that they're struggling to make ends meet in everyday life for just the necessities: food, roof over their head, etc., etc., etc. And we are saying, okay, well, it's Christmas. We need to have the Christmas spirit. Let's treat each other good and let's give gifts. And more often than not, what that translates into is the rest of the year, everybody treats others generally like crap. I mean, I can't understand this idea of engendering a certain spirit or an attitude. And it's the same thing. Attitude, spirit, same thing. Engendering that for one day out of the year, like with Thanksgiving, a giving of thanks. I'm thankful that I have this. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that I have a roof over my head. I'm thankful I've got good friends. Whatever. Thankful I have a job. But shouldn't you be that way every day of every year, thankful for things that you have? I mean, I don't understand this whole observance of one day set aside, especially when actually it causes people it's like a fake way of expressing something that you should be expressing all the time, day in, day out. So again, these holidays, I don't like them. And I live in a world, and I've said this in another video, I do believe, and again, this is about belief systems too, because Thanksgiving is part of a belief system too, because then somebody says, yes, thank you for giving thanks to God, and they'll say it's the Judeo-Christian version of God, whatever. So it's all tied in with religious beliefs too. And the whole thing is, people, then you're in their company, or you work with them, or whatever the case may be. And I have no problem with people having beliefs. Uh, and like I said earlier in another video, as long as your beliefs are really empowering to you, but again, many of these beliefs aren't. People think they're empowering them, but there's a caveat to them. There's usually some underlying elements that are not that empowering to these people with these beliefs. But the other problem is they can't seem sometimes to be happy with just believing something themselves. They think that they got to convince you of their beliefs, you know. And it makes me think of the idea of misery loves company. Maybe they're miserable in some ways with their beliefs, and because they just want, they subconsciously they hate being in misery by themselves, so they want other people. Like even today, somewhere, and somebody wished me a happy Thanksgiving, and sometimes I will. I'm not a total peckerhead about things. I don't always say, yeah, stick it up your wazoo. But this one particular individual today, all I said was, I was nice about it. I said, well, I can't remember. I kind of was thanked him, but yeah, hey, you don't have to say that to me. I'm good without it. And I didn't even go into an explanation. I would have maybe said something to him more if he'd asked me, well, why do you feel that way or something. I don't really give too much information though, unless people ask for it. They have to come to me. It's like I don't believe in casting, and I'm not trying to act like I know it all, or I'm not trying to call people any kind of derogative name here. This is just a metaphor. Christians should be familiar with it. I don't cast pearls before swine, and I don't lead horses to water that don't want to drink. In some ways, even doing this YouTube video stuff, I've questioned in the past. This is why it took me so long to get around to this, but I finally decided I was going to do it. This is why I had one YouTube channel before, and I only put a couple videos, and then I never did anything after that. I finally got done with that one, and I created this one. And then years later, I mean, there's like 10 years roughly in between the two YouTube channels. Meantime, I was watching other people's YouTube content, and that's how I got a lot of ideas for what I ultimately wanted to do with mine. And but yeah, I see what the pitfalls of it. I've seen the problems people run into. I've seen the hecklers, the trolls in the comments section. I've seen um, uh, the whole argument with people having to watch with copyright infringement. I've seen the whole idea of demonetization of YouTube videos that goes on and stuff. I mean, this is the whole thing. I wanted to see what the dynamics were of this whole thing for a good 10 years or more before I decided if I was going to get my feet wet in it. I'm not one to go on to a fad when it first comes out. Like with a computer. I've got a computer now, obviously. I'm using a computer right here and now. Do you realize, people, I'm here to tell you that it took me a long time to get a computer. Now, I had one when I was young, and that was way back in 1986. And it was one of those Commodore 64s. Some of you out there might know what I'm talking about. Uh, well, I was working with it when I was a kid. I was in high school, junior high, roughly in and around there, 9th, 10th grade. And I had actually wanted to, I had a couple games. Back then, there was some games that were pale in comparison to the video games today. One was called Caverns of Kafka. The other was called Forbidden Forest. And I played that a little bit. But then I also wanted to learn programming. And I guess part of the motivation was, well, I want to create my own video games. But when I tried to learn programming, I was not very good at it. I just couldn't figure it out. And to this day, I don't know how to program anything. I understand I can work around the graphical user interface of other programs. I can operate certain programs, utilize the computer for various operational things. But me, a programmer, probably never going to happen. And am I saddened by that? No. But like I said, anyway, then so many years were in between before I got a computer again. I didn't get a computer then until 2007. Well, let me go back first. 1986, I had that Commodore 64. Well, something went wrong with it. I had my theories on what happened to it, but it basically blew its oats. So there I was without a computer. Never ended up getting another one. just other things in life, and then I got into Christianity and religion after I got out of high school, shortly, well, roughly a few years afterward, and just all kinds of things were going on in my life, and I was an emotionally needy individual, um, full of greed in certain ways, and kicking my high chair, and full of lust. Um, but lo and behold, long story short, 2007, I finally got a computer again, and it was a used one. But I started to teach myself. I got a book called PCs for Dummies, and I just started teaching myself some things. And you experiment around, and you got some time here. And I had more time at that point because at one point I was laid off from my job, so I was able to learn a few things. It was and many people say, "Oh, get laid off from a job. Oh no, what am I going to do for money?" And well, I drew unemployment, but people then say, "Oh, I got to hurry up and get back to work." Well, if you got a lot of big bills and you have your mortgage and things like that, well, I didn't have that many bills, and I didn't have a mortgage. I rented. I've never had my own place. I thought, you know what? I got a great opportunity to learn some things for a change, things I hadn't learned before, and things that I didn't learn in school. And in the process of learning some new things and things I didn't learn in school, I got to realizing that some of what I got earlier I learned in life was just a bunch of conditioned nonsense. And so I began to study various things. I even studied accounting at one point. But let me tell you something. I do not want to be a number cruncher, bean counter. Forget it. I understand a little bit more of the terminology now. I tried to learn. I thought, is this something I would like to pursue? Uh, and in the end, suffice it to say, it's like, no. That's like Alan Watts once said. I listened to Alan Watts one time, and he talked about the fact that he had his own accountant. He didn't care to do that himself. He said it just didn't thrill him. And Alan Watts was an intelligent man. I'm sure he could have understood what to do to crunch numbers, but it just it didn't thrill him. So I mean, why do something you're not thrilled? Even if you have the ability to do something, if it's not really something that keeps you interested and you hate it to death, I mean, why do it if you don't have to? So that's why I'm often amazed at people. I know I'm discussing a lot of things here. I'm often amazed at people who work jobs and they're so disgruntled. And I've worked with them. Like, say you're a new guy at a job, and the guys that have been there for a while, and they're always and grumping and grouching and stuff, and then they treat you like crap. I was even at a job where I got called a greenhorn one time. Greenhorn, you know. And, but now in hindsight, too, I realized that they didn't know a whole lot more than me. They knew a few tricks of the trade, but their knowledge base wasn't necessarily that much greater than mine. They had specialized knowledge. They could learn some tricks of the trade, or whatever it was, whatever the trade was, the job entailed. And so, but I often wondered, and I wonder to this day, of course, if you hate, because they always had this attitude like they hated their job. And I'm like, if you hate it so much, why are you doing it? Now, I realize there's certain situations. Maybe they already got married when they were young. Now they got a wife, maybe kids, and they can't just up and quit a job out of the blue or something without something else to replace it. But sometimes it seems like they won't even try to look for something else. But then they'll be just grouchy, and then they're hard to work with when you're the new guy coming along. And I think to myself, what a miserable state to be in. And then what they do is you see them, they're the guys that go to the bar on Friday night or whatever, or even sometimes during the week after work, and they're spending some of their money, if they're, well, unless they're a real responsible person and takes care of their family first or whatever. But you see some of the younger ones single, but still, even some of the married guys, they'll take a certain amount of their money and they'll go to the bar and they'll blow it there. And I think to myself, the only reason they're doing that is because they hate their job. When they get off work or on the weekends when they don't have to work, the beer is something for them to drown their sorrows in. They don't like their job, and I think it's just terrible. It's just terrible. And I could talk about the whole job concept. And there was a man I listened to, a video I've got. I'd like to share clips from that one of these days too, here on my channel. A guy who has studied this and wrote a book on about. Well, the title of the book, or at least the title of the video, was "The Explosion of Bullshit Jobs." But it kind of touches on some ideas of what I'm trying to say here. And it's just, there's a lot of unnecessary jobs in many ways, bureaucratic, administrative jobs, and people hate them even. and they don't really add that much to society. In fact, they detract a lot from it and cause more problems than they solve. But again, I remember growing up and you watched the Jetsons. I know it was a cartoon, but the idea was they tried to envision was someday people won't have to work, or people won't have to work mundane kind of jobs, or people could be more creative and so forth, and stress would be relieved. And I'm saying, here I am, I'm 51 years old, so 20 some 30 some odd years passing by, you know, from when I was young and heard these things, and I'm like, what happened to that? What happened to the idea that we were going to be less stressful? I mean, yeah, we got lots of technological things, but we're being stressed out still. Many people working still in ways that, and they're not happy with. Um, just like with diseases, I could get onto that too, and I'll get into that in future videos. Diseases. I heard that when I was growing up, the medical science was going to lick this, that, and the other, and it was going to be gone. Well, a whole new generation or two have come here now, and they're telling them the same thing. And then if you try to relay this to this younger generation, well, they're telling us the same thing. Nothing's changed. So, I mean, we got more pharmaceutical drugs out there treating symptoms and then masking the underlying problem. And in the end, well, sometimes they're even trying to pass off the stuff that's not even FDA approved. And then years later, you got a law firm with a class action suit against a drug company because of some side effects or some other problem it caused. A lot of times side effect worse than what it was supposed to be treating to begin with. Because I've literally sat and watched television. I don't have regular TV, but in the past I did, and I've been at other people's houses. I've literally sat down and watched where there'd be a commercial for a drug. And at the end it would say, all the different little caveats to it, Even Jeff Foxworthy did a stand-up routine where he kind of joked about this, but it's not just a mere joke. It's reflective of what's really true. It's ironic. And I also have access to a song I gotten before that a guy sings a song, a little ditty that talks about drugs and their side effects. And I just highly recommend that people think about this a little bit more. But anyway, these side effects end up being worse than what they're supposed to treat. But like I said, I've literally sat down and watched a commercial where it's about a drug, whatever the name of it is, and it got some fancy name, and of course, because nobody could probably pronounce the scientific name and the chemical name. And next commercial will be about some class action lawsuit against some drug from a few years back that people have had problems from, and now there's a class action suit to sue the drug company. I mean, it's like, hello, what more do you need to see, people? Are you getting the message? I don't know. Okay, but anyway, again, I've gone off on all kinds of things here. I apologize. But like I said, the holidays, and I just don't understand it. I have nothing against people getting together. We should be able to get together almost any time of the year. It's funny, though, I've noticed that if I ever mention to people, well, let's get together on Saturday. Oh, I'm busy this and busy that. But when the holiday comes, people got time. I'm saying, so you don't see a problem with that, people. You can shun off getting with other people just out of the blue, just because, hey, we're all human beings and we should love one another. But in observance of a commercialized holiday, oh, yes, let's make sure we get together then. I don't get it. I don't get it. If somebody could please explain that to me, I'd be more than happy to listen. But it makes no sense. I'm sorry, but I see a lot of things that are wrong. And sometimes and I used to get angry in the past. There was a time period a few years back when I got angry about some things. I mean, I was even went to the bar a few times and drank, and one time in particular, I got into a little bit of trouble. But I don't want to do that anymore because that doesn't do any good. And then people say, "Well, see, you're crazy." I see what goes on, and I just feel like I have to voice it, but in a format where I can just do it without hopefully being accused of any being a belligerent person or violent or terroristic or um, what have you. And the only thing you have to worry about maybe is some amount of political correctness. What's right in polite society, and if when we're talking about the people that consider themselves to be the arbiters in this society of what is polite and correct, um, it's just a joke. You know, and I think it was Bill Hicks once said. Again, he's a comedian, and many people wouldn't like him. I know many people wouldn't, but you have to be an aware person and know what he was really trying to get at. In order to, he didn't like, he wasn't about sex jokes and the common joking stuff, which anybody can do that, and people can laugh at it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he was a bit just like George Carlin. He was a deeper kind of a comedian, trying to be also a social commentator, make deeper, almost philosophical points, hoping that it would take root in the people's minds. Well, I'm here to tell you I'm one of the people that their ideas took root in. Not just those comedians, but other people, other sources of information. But I do credit George Carlin and Bill Hicks with waking me up to some things too. And Bill said one time, well, I forgot what I was going to say. See, I got off on a tangent. This is my problem sometimes. Um, hmm. Yeah. What am I have to do? Stop this video. I have to review the video and clip another part in so I can remember what point I was trying to get at. But anyway, Bill Hicks said he said I can't remember. Boy, that just anyway. I can cover it in a different video as far as that goes. But yeah, I don't understand. I don't get it. And then people wonder in some way. Some people don't think there's anything wrong with our society, or they think largely it's a good society and there's only a few bad eggs here and there, small time crooks and stuff, and then they ignore the larger crooks in society. And you know, or they think, well, we got institutions here, we just got to get the right people in them. And I'm thinking, you just don't get it. I don't know where else to go with this video, and I guess I shouldn't have said as much as I did, but I wanted to get it out there. My main concern, and I guess I really strayed from it, was to talk about the holidays, but all this stuff ties together as far as I'm concerned. And so the holidays, yeah, I don't understand it. I am not against people getting together, as I said. It has to do with the conditioning and the fact that people, without realizing it, it's like they're being told when they don't realize it, when they can get together, under what types of conditioning and indoctrinations, and it's largely to siphon off money, but more importantly, energy, creative energy from them. And that's what it's designed to do. Is it a deliberate design? Well, we get into that. We can get into the idea of conspiracy. Nowadays it seems like people don't like you getting into that territory sometimes. There for a while it was somewhat all right, but well, as George Carlin once said, you don't need a formal conspiracy. In other words, you don't need some groups that do secretly meet with a total 100% thought out agenda. All you need, though, is definitely at least people who want to dominate something and have common interest coming together and trying to trying to keep certain information to themselves, secret, and knowing how to manipulate masses of people by knowing what those people believe and what those people uh, appealing to their emotions, appealing to their lusts and their material greed. You can get people to do things the way you want them to, and you can come out smelling like a rose. You and the others that have that common goal. But then again, that is what conspiracy means. To conspire means to breathe together, to think of the same mental attitude, to have something in common, and which usually translates into some sort of agenda. Terence McKenna didn't believe in formal conspiracies as such per se, totally. I don't think he denied them completely. And you can listen to Terence McKenna on the internet. There's various information about him out there. Terence McKenna, TerranceMcKenna. Type it in, look him up. Listen, I highly recommend that some people start to listen to him and Alan Watts. It's not where I started out. To tell you the truth, people, I started out with listening to Tony Robbins. Anthony, Tony, whichever you want to call him by, which people say he was a motivational guru, but if I remember right from reading his book, Awaken the Giant Within, he didn't really like to be called that or labeled that. But nevertheless, he was a coach on peak performance. I think he welcomed that label. But lo and behold, years later, by starting with him, I got to Terence McKenna and Alan Watts. And again, because in the end, these guys are saying very similar things about psychology, philosophy, how the mind works, how to set yourself up for greater success, how to get rid of limiting beliefs, how to raise your standards. Wink, wink at Tony Robbins out there. Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, too. Terence McKenna said you don't need a formal conspiracy. Even George Carlin said you didn't. But neither one denied that there is a dominator culture and there are people with certain common interests that are in places well entrenched. And probably most of us in the public don't even know who these individuals totally are. There's some information out there on the internet too about who these people are that you can look up too. Various videos on that, and which I've gone through the whole slew of those things over the last, more than a decade now. Yeah. And, I started out wanting to be somebody that was successful. I wanted to know how to think better, how to have more prosperity. But it led me on a journey that woke me up to a lot of things, psychologically, philosophically. And material gain is not really my concern anymore. And I'm not saying it's a terrible thing, and I'm not going to be one of these people that says, well, you should seek spiritual things and not material things, and if you don't, then you're in for trouble or you're a bad person. No. I can't advocate what I've discovered and how I tend to look at life and what my goals are. I can't advocate them to other people any more than they should try to advocate their goals to me. Like telling me, well, you got to get your own house. Well, you got to think about getting married or something. It's funny that I bring that up now because there have been people who have said that I ought to be, well, not that I ought to be married, but they kind of hint at it about me. Well, you find yourself a woman or something like that. And the weird thing was when I was growing up, when I was young and going through puberty and even beyond puberty, and I thought that, I needed to find a woman and I needed to get married, and if I find the right woman, that'll make me happy or whatever. And I even had some material things I thought would make me happy. One time I had a motorcycle because I listened to some guys that I work with, and they kind of led me to believe that if I had a motorcycle, it would be a chick magnet. So that was my motivation. But then again, I actually liked the bike more, and I didn't even care about getting any chicks. So, but again, the bike wore off on me too soon because it was like, had to keep it clean. Always concerned when I went out on the road because, some people tend to not be able to see bikes. They're a vehicle that's a little less visible than, a car or something. I always wondered if that Next turn I go around, somebody's pulling out somewhere or whatever, and they don't see me, and there I go. Bike gets stopped by the car, and I continue to fly through the air and go down the road and get road rash. But a lot of factors. I just finally said, yeah, it was fun for a while. And you see, because many people might think I haven't tried certain things, so maybe I'm biased that I don't want to do certain things or have certain things like they do because I have never experienced it. Well, I'm here to tell you people I have. So I've made informed decisions in my life. Conclusions I've come to after many years about what I take interest in, what I think's worthwhile, and what I think isn't, hasn't come from some willy-nilly brain of some adolescent who hasn't had experience. But people talk about me. Not again. This is not like everybody and their brothers trying to fix me up with somebody. Although I've had some people wanting to try to play matchmaker a little bit. But it's funny because when I was growing up, and I won't mention any names. I don't know that it would matter. But anyway, I just had an individual, at least anyway, one individual that always used to tell me, "Oh, you got plenty of time," and "Oh, you don't need to find somebody." "Oh, that's not the." And then years later, this individual, I talked to them, and you know what they said to me? They asked me. They said, "Don't you ever get lonely?" I looked at this individual, but I'm not the type to ever be the kind of person to say, "Huh, funny how the tables have turned," or um, I'm not an "I told you so" kind of guy. But deep down inside of me, I'm thinking, this is the person that used to tell me I had plenty of time. But see, what happened was this person got the experience of losing somebody they were with for many years to death. They lost them through death. And now they're thinking about that loss and that they want somebody to fill that void. And that was the only reason they said this to me, because of their own void in their life. And it's like, well, guess what? I was feeling like there was a void in my life when I was young, and you weren't exactly empathetic toward me then. And again, this isn't about revenge, and it's not about me saying, well, see, what comes around goes around. But my point is, it's just ironic how things like that change, Person that tells you one thing could turn around years later, tell you something, and then years later the shoe's on the other foot, so to speak. And I wasn't without empathy toward this person. And it's like, but because I knew what they were going through in a certain way. And maybe it'd have been better, it'd have been nice if they could have understood what I was going through back then, whenever it was the shoe on the other foot. But anyway, no. Well, I think I spent enough time on this video. People can get to know me a little bit. I don't know. What all do you say about yourself? You know, that's really all I want to say right now. Can't believe I even said all this. I really want my videos to be about some entertaining content, philosophical discussion of sorts. And it's going to touch upon political things and so on and so forth a little bit, but not in a sense that most people discuss politics and religion and stuff as if, say, well, I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Christian, or and they take this stance, or I'm an atheist, and they take this stance like, and what I believe is right, and the other people don't believe it, you're dumb, or something. Or, you're the bad guy and I'm the good guy, or something. I don't want to take that kind of a stance, because that's not what it's really all about. We have to transcend ideologies and boxes of thinking. And again, Alan Watts, another man, I've listened to this guy, is basically a philosopher. He passed away in 1970, 71, but you can get a lot of his stuff, audio from him, and there's books of his that you could get. And he gave a lot of talks, back in his day. and he talked about the concept of things. Now, well, the word, and again, I'm going to discuss words a lot too. The word thing is correlated with the word think, because a thing is a think. And somebody said, what do you mean by that? Because even Kevin Trudeau, if anybody's familiar with Kevin Trudeau, I have listened to his what's called Your Wish is Your Command CDs. And he talked about saying how our brains are like a transmitter, which I found evidence and I found things about this to be pretty much true, but the heart has to be taken into consideration too, because technically the heart is where the feelings come from, which is the important thing, more so than the thoughts. If you don't have the right feelings with the thoughts, then it's kind of a moot point. But the heart is the stronger electromagnetic field generating thing in our body. And then again, this corresponds with what they call the chakras. And the heart chakra is very powerful. But the thing is, it's about vibrational frequencies of energy in the ether, in this magnetic force, the divine mind, in the different modalities too that it manifests in, like electromagnetic phenomena, what we call gravity. And again, listen to Ken Wheeler's videos and you'll get a good explanation of what gravity really is, and so forth, and even what time really is, what we're considering time, what it really is, so to speak, and so forth. Again, sorry for that, but getting off on a tangent. But Alan Watts said that things are think. Kevin Trudeau said thoughts are things. Now, when I heard Kevin Trudeau say this, when I listened to his CDs, I'm like, what? Again, I tried to go along with it because I wanted to empower myself to draw into my life things that would be more of what I wanted and less of the things that I don't want in my life, And so when he said that, I took it with a grain of salt, but it still didn't really make sense to me. I was like, thoughts are things. Thoughts are these immaterial things. What do you mean things? And so I couldn't totally correlate it. But then when I listened to Alan Watts several years after that, and he in one of his talks, he talks about thing and think, and then even the words are so similar. Because what is a thing? Well, a thing is when we give a label to something, like this cup here. This is a cup. We call this a thing. Well, cup in our English language, it's a noun. It's a word that we call a noun. But it's a complete conceptualization of the mind. We think of a label to put on something, a word, and we call it a separate thing. Say, well, it's still a separate thing even if we didn't put a label on it, somebody would say. But see, this came from somebody's mind to begin with, to come up with the idea of a cup to hold something to drink in. So these things that we think are ideological, which ideology means a thought, idea, a thought, idea, ideology, think a thought, conceptualize it, manifest it, make the cup, but it came from a thought originally to begin with. Somebody had to think the idea of the cup up. So a thing is from a think. Thoughts are things. Thoughts can become things. So again, maybe that doesn't impress people too much, but I think it's very fascinating. And I'm here to tell you, when it comes to words, words are telling a lot more than what you think they're telling you. That's all I'll say. For anybody out there that's a little more awake that would hear these videos, see these videos, they'll know pretty much definitely what I'm talking about. For others, might struggle with it. All I can say is maybe keep watching my videos. Watch some of the other stuff I refer you to, some of the people where I learned some stuff from. That's, again, like I said, I'm not a real smart person. I give credit to a lot of other smart people out there. I tend to be somebody that looks like they're scatterbrained. That's because I'm an integrated thinker. Intuitively, all the things I've said here in this video, I understand. I realize by making a video, I'm trying to get someone else out there to understand it, would watch it. There's no guarantee that I'm going to, even if I try to use the best words. It's like when you went to school. A teacher can be up in front of the class, and you might be one of the ones that gets it, but the other one's going to struggle with it. Are you going to say it's totally the teacher's fault? It's a little bit of both, maybe. Okay, the teacher just doesn't know how to get to certain people. If they could figure out a better way to word it or whatever, different metaphors, analogies, different examples, whatever, they could get those other few individuals that aren't understanding to understand. Problem is in our society too, we've got so many people, we got different people that learn differently. What I mean by that is some people learn something by reading it. Somebody else might learn by touching an object or touching the thing that's being spoken of rather than to think about it in their mind. It's called kinesthetic learning. Others learn, audibly by hearing something. Others, they can learn something by watching, like a skill set, by watching somebody else do it, like a photographic mind, so to speak, rather than try to read it in a textbook. Because heck, there's people out there that got better skills than I do. They can watch somebody do something and they can do it, and I try to do it, and I can't do it to save my life. And I can even read about it, which was used to be my preferred way of learning. It's not now. And I'm not dissing reading, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to put reading down. It shouldn't be put down. Just one of many ways to learn. And so I might read about the same subject thinking, well, I like reading about something. But I can read it and still not get it. But this other person, just by watching somebody do something, can pick it up like that. How do you explain that? So, anyway, I can try to explain things, but when you know something intuitively, and I've said this to people before, you can be somebody who has a skill set, even mechanical aptitude. You know what you're doing, and anybody can see you know what you're doing. You diagnose their car or something, you fix it, and they say, wow, he fixed it. He must know what he's doing. Now, tell him to explain to somebody how he fixed it. Now, that might be more of a chore for him because he doesn't know how to put it in words, maybe. Depends. But does that mean he doesn't know would you automatically assume he doesn't know anything about what he's trying to talk about? That he doesn't know the information? He doesn't intuitively know it? No, you wouldn't say that because you see the evidence that he knows what he's doing. But explaining it to somebody else might be hard. Again, a little saying of mine I like. I've been coming up with a lot of my own sayings, and maybe that's about all I'm good for. Like I said, one of my sayings now is, actually it's a borrowed saying, but I just switched it around because I like to switch things around. I'm always a day short and $1 late. That's not a strong belief, but I'm just saying I have a lot of experience at times when I've been a day late and $1 short, but I like to flip the words around a little bit. Just part of what I like to do with words. But also I have this saying where I've said that it's not, and I've worded it a couple different ways, but usually I word it this way. It's not that I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just that I don't know how to talk about what I know. And by saying that, I'm not saying I'm a know-it-all. Unfortunately, in our society, many people think you don't know something unless you're able to explain it to somebody else. Because they think that's proof, that you can explain it to them, and then oh, yes, you obviously know. There's many examples of people who know things intuitively, but they may not be able to teach it to somebody else, or at least by words, put it in words and explain it. The word explain means X means out. Plane. You put it out in a plane, out in front of people, put it all out on a plane for people to see. What you know intuitively. When we think thoughts, do we think in words to begin with? No, we don't. What we think is in pictures, because we dream in pictures, moving pictures, video like. We dream in pictures. Okay? And since we dream and we think in pictures, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we don't have to sit there and think about the 1,000 words. We got the picture. But when we're talking to people, we're trying to paint a picture. That's why we say statements like, Do you see what I mean? Are you getting the picture of what I'm trying to tell you? Why do we do that? Why do we say that? Well, because intuitively we know that the idea behind words to tell somebody something is to get them to form a picture in their mind of what we already have a picture in our mind of. Wouldn't it be nice? Of course, that'd be like a form of telepathy. If I could take my picture in my mind and transfer it to you, and then you can go, aha, and I don't have to say one word to you. There's the fallacy and the problem, that language is a bit of a problem. It's meant to solve problems, but it's also a hindrance. Terence McKenna once talked about, or many times he talked about, what he called the idea of a visibly or visually beheld language, which he said is what happens more or less when certain tribes in the Amazon and so forth take ayahuasca brew, because they'll all see the same vision collectively. That's pretty much telepathy. They're seeing the same thing, whether it's colors and images or whatever. They see the same thing, and that's why one could talk about it, and then the next person down the line can pick up where that person left off. If you ask me, that's like being on the same page, and that's what we need in this world more, in some way, shape, or form. Not all this segmented compartmentalization and people not understanding. I don't get that. You know, it's like having people in a room, that three people, and trying to get them to converse. One speaks English, one speaks French, and one speaks Spanish, but there's no translator for them. I mean, and each one only knows their own language that they're speaking in. How can you get much done that way? So I could go on and on and on, and I better just cut it short at this. I'm sorry, this is probably one of the longest videos I've ever done. There'll be other long ones, but I'm going to try to be more focused on certain ones, and I have a certain specific topic or specific content in mind. All right, well, that's it for this video. Signing off, over and out.